everyone. Welcome back to Metabolic. Today, I'm here with my husband. He's joining just to make sure this sounds like me, I guess, and make sure that this is like as real and authentic as possible. Not that the other one wasn't, but just, I don't know. I'm just still figuring all this out. So I appreciate you all tuning in to episode 2. I hope this is episode 2. Anyways, today we're going to talk about how to stop dieting and start building a metabolic lifestyle that lasts. So really just to stop dieting and start living, because it all comes down to living out the calling that you have received with renewed energy and confidence. Gosh, it's a lot to unpack. So come on in, take a seat, and let's hang out. Welcome to Metabolic, a faith-based podcast for women ready to stop hiding, start living, and steward their metabolic health with grace. I'm Christy Teague, a pharmacist turned faith-based metabolic health coach, and this is your safe, cozy space to tune into both your body, your blood sugar, and the Lord. So whether you're driving, folding laundry, or curled up with coffee and a blanket on the couch, I just want you to know you're not alone here. Together, we'll learn how to care for our bodies without idolizing them, invite God into every aspect of our wellness journey without the new age, and start living out the calling He has placed on our lives. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's get started. I do have some notes that I guess I'm going to try to follow because I can get pretty tangential. I think that's a word, right? I can get pretty tangential and go off on 10 different storylines and then we circle back, but I am going to try not to do that as much as possible, especially with this roundabout testimony that the Lord has given me. It is a lot of ups and downs, and basically it just started out with years of chronic dieting. So the reason I'm so passionate about stop dieting and to start building a metabolic lifestyle that lasts is because I have done it all as far as diets go and workout programs and all those things. I kind of shared that on the first episode, but I guess you could say that all of those years of chronic dieting starting at a very young age helped me build a healthy lifestyle, but not necessarily a metabolic lifestyle. So let's back up a little bit. Chronic dieting, since I was 8 years old, I first enrolled in Weight Watchers. Just despite eating fairly well for a kid, I mean, it's just like your normal kid. I didn't overeat or anything. I was really active, but I was in the 99th percentile of weight for pretty much my whole life, and they didn't understand why, so I got a doctor's note to start Weight Watchers because that was just the diet that everybody was on, and it was just a good, well-rounded, learn what you eat and develop good habits and keep staying active. So my parents were really cautious about doing that, so I don't want to blame them for anything. When I tell these stories, they just were always looking out for me and doing the best that they could, but it definitely leaves some wounds. Since then, I've never really stopped dieting or working out. Around high school, it became less about weight loss and more about just trying to stop gaining weight as my motivation because weight loss just became impossible. I mentioned on the other podcast that I did the doctor diet, which was really just phentermine and B12 shots, and it was a very, very low carb diet with around 400 to 500 calories at times. And I could never get into ketosis despite being so disciplined. And they just couldn't understand why the weight wasn't coming off. And I had no energy at all because I wasn't eating anything. And so that's when we started to get a little concerned and needed to pursue functional medicine. Just a more holistic view of what's going on in our body. We got introduced to food sensitivity testing and inflammation and, an anti-inflammatory diet, not just how much you eat, but what are you actually eating. And I got my hopes up. I was like, oh, this is really going to change everything. And it helped a little bit. I focused also on increasing my strength training, taking professional grade supplements, getting more specialized lab testing. And actually, I got my very first Fitbit in high school and started to track my steps. I remember my brother-in-law at the time, he saw it and he was like, "Wait, you're excited about this?" When I got it on Christmas morning, he was like, "I don't understand. You're just going to wear it all the time?" And it's so funny because like now, obviously you look around and everybody has an Apple Watch on their wrist or a Garmin or an Oura Ring or something like that. But I knew that this was going to be a thing. And I was just an early adopter because I love just seeking out how I could track or improve or optimize because I just became a bit obsessed with this metabolic health journey. And I wasn't calling it a metabolic health journey at the time. I was just trying to eat healthy and lose weight all the time. But I saw very little progress on my weight loss. And I was always counseled to seek out better sleep and stress management because they thought I had what they called adrenal fatigue at the time. Now, a lot of people refer to that as HPA axis dysfunction. But basically, I just dismissed that so much because I was like, are you kidding me? I am at a highly competitive prep school, and then I was going into an extremely busy undergrad schedule. I was doing a million extracurriculars and jobs and sorority and leadership roles. I just shoved that advice aside and ordered my third venti Starbucks for the day and just went to the gym and sweated out as much as I could. And I just really wanted to focus more on, I guess, what I could achieve by sweating more and eating less or eating cleaner. And unfortunately, this led to disordered eating. Not necessarily an eating disorder diagnosis per se, but just patterns of disordered eating. And then eventually just resentment of food altogether because I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't eat anything without having a food reaction. And food is so boring and everybody else gets to eat whatever they want. And it's not fair, just all of that pity party spiral. A lot of resentment and bitterness and just anger towards my body, which now that could be a whole podcast episode. And I'm sure we'll get into it at some point. Just about how emotions really do live in the body and trauma stored in the body is really important to unpack. So all of that dismissing is probably why eventually I burn out. And I was like, okay, Lord, do you want to be invited into all this? Do you want to come into my body image issues, this disordered eating, my metabolic health journey? Like, I didn't know that you cared about this, but I would love for you to help me because I am just desperate for solutions. I'm desperate to feel better. And this was at the end of my undergrad, and I took a gap year to work for a campus ministry to help with women's ministry. And I just tell you all that as context that I was really close to the Lord, and this was the first time I had ever even thought about inviting him into this area of my life. It just was so closed off, and I didn't realize how much he actually cared about my weight or my appearance struggles. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, of course he cares about it. It is a big deal. I mean, it prevents us from showing up. It prevents us from living out the calling that we have received with energy and confidence. It impacts our purpose. So obviously he cares. He cares about it all. So anyways, this was a huge breakthrough. And I had some really great friends who just encouraged me. They loved the Lord. They also were pursuing how to integrate the Lord and their faith into their fitness journey specifically. And so that was just so helpful to have community. And it was really the first time that I started to realize what God could truly build if I surrendered my career to him as well. And so it set me on this path of like, could I go to pharmacy school and then come back and help people get off of their medications through strategic lifestyle changes and workouts and eating well and sleep and stress and just talk about Jesus every step of the way? And yeah, that led me to pursue pharmacy as the path to build upon this experience, to hopefully help people just like you steward their medications wisely, their lifestyle modifications, and just bring Jesus into all of these rhythms to build a metabolic lifestyle that actually lasts. So that's the abbreviated version of the first half. Now let's get into Act 2. Act 2 is where I know the Lord wants to enter into my metabolic dysfunction. I didn't have that title at the time, but I kind of forgot about the sleep and stress part again, because as an achiever, it's just hard to get through your results-driven brain, especially when you are in an intense environment like pharmacy school. So during this time, I started to notice something that just didn't make sense. It was no longer just about my weight creeping up year after year despite discipline and effort. It was no longer just about food sensitivities. I had learned how to manage through those types of things, or just accept it at least. But now my body started to send signals that I just didn't know how to interpret, and I started to freak out a little bit because it started to impact my performance and how I was showing up to the rest of the world. I thought I was hiding it or just drinking more and more coffee and masking it, but it became impossible to hide as I entered into the workforce and years later of just all of this developing. So over the course of years, like I said, my weight loss resistance turned into full-blown weight gain year after year. No matter how clean I ate, how perfect my macros were, how much I fasted, or how hard I worked out, the scale would just keep going up. And no one believed me except my husband, who was such an amazing support system. I mean, he was such a godsend just during this time specifically, just encouraging me. I mean, he made me throw away the scale at one point because he was like, okay, this is impacting just your day before it even gets started. You're already texting me how depressed you are that, the scale is up X amount of pounds and you've had so many consistent days in a row. And I would have meltdowns as well while working out. We were so consistent about working out during pharmacy school because it was such a stress reliever for us. And I really started to look at it as like, okay, this is just for my mental health. If I am not going to lose weight, hopefully this will help me just prevent weight gain. That didn't happen. And this was beyond pharmacy school, like I said, as well. This was into our early years of marriage as well, when we were in engagement before just residency and all that. But anyways, I remember having so many meltdowns and crying while working out because specifically with push-ups, I was like, okay, here we are trying to do push-ups and I do not feel like I'm getting any stronger. And this is just very discouraging as somebody who wants to achieve progress. They kept saying progress, not perfection. And I'm like, well, I'm just getting worse. How is that fair? So anyways, we would have a lot of tears during our Faster Way to Fat Loss workouts. They're a great workout plan. And we've done those for how many years? Gosh, 8 years more? Like maybe even more because we did the PDFs. And then we did the computer. We would bring down the computer to the gym. And then they got an app. But all that to say, they would just preach progress over perfection, like a lot of fitness culture preaches. And that's great to combat the diet culture, of perfection. But this is where I was like, okay, something is really not right here. And then my energy tanked. So it became less about just like the scale going up year after year, despite all these efforts. My energy tanked and I was exhausted before the day even started. I mentioned this in a previous podcast. Grant would just bring me coffee to even wake up just at my bedside table. And then when I was starting residency and my clinical jobs in the hospital, I would have to account for like 2 hours on the couch to deal with the morning grogginess, just to wake up and become myself. That is not normal. And so if that is you, just really tune in and seek out some solutions and don't let yourself be dismissed. And thankfully now there's more functional medicine providers and more providers who think outside the box, even if they're not like functional, integrative, holistic. And people are more clued in that this is a thing. But I just had to suffer through it. And I mean, I tried some like adrenal protocols and things like that, but nothing really seemed to touch this energy level crash for years because of my metabolic health and nervous system regulation. And just, I wasn't aware of all of the strategy that I could really implement that doesn't actually take that much time. It's just like Stephen Covey, right? I think is his name. You got to put the big rocks in first and then like the little rocks in the sand. And so now, like, I just prioritize it. I just make sure, even if it's like 15 minutes of fun every day, like just instead of scrolling on Instagram when I wake up in the morning, I'm doing a puzzle and it's so fun. It's like the best thing ever. And I'm sitting there with my light box shining on me and playing worship music or a podcast or something that is not just doom scrolling your phone, chugging coffee, trying to become alive, which is what I lived like for years. And I was just like, man, there's got to be something more than this, because this is just a terrible morning routine. So anyways, I was just surviving though. And then my periods also became terrible and debilitating. Hindsight, we still don't know, like suspected endometriosis, which kind of like explains a lot of this, and or PCOS insulin resistance or just insulin resistance. I mean, I'm getting a lot of great treatment, and then my own Metabolic program has been the implementation of the lifestyle and the blood sugar and the mindset training, which, like I said, I didn't even know that I was really building that at the time, but that's what's really taken all of this and just allowed it to become a lifestyle. But anyways, before I received any diagnosis of any kind or any suspected diagnosis, I started doing some functional medicine hormone detox protocols after we did some expensive labs like the Dutch test for the first time, and started tracking hormones for the first time in my life with, a Nido and some of these other devices. But nothing seemed to really help long term. I mean, it moved the needle a little bit, especially the year that I just really dedicated to stress and sleep management. But I mean, I would have to take tons of NSAIDs on my cycle, and it just wouldn't even cut through the pain. And of course, it wouldn't touch the mood swings. That's a whole nother thing. But when I was working in the hospital, this may be TMI for some of you, but I would be in tears, either from mood swings or just chronic pain, because I didn't have a TENS unit at the time either, or progesterone or anything like that. And I would need to see patients, but I would be stuck in the restroom trying to figure out, like, how am I supposed to live out my calling as a pharmacist and help these patients when I can't even survive? Like, I need to go home. Am I supposed to go home every single month? Anyways, I know a lot of women out there can relate to that, because there's period pain, but then if you have endometriosis or other hormonal imbalances, it's almost like labor pain. I mean, I haven't had kids, but that's what I've heard. I mean, it's not normal to suffer like that. So definitely seek out help, and the right type of help, because medical gaslighting is a whole thing. And I'll record a podcast on a recent visit that I had, and I was reminded just how far we still have to go in our broken healthcare system, because I left in tears after all of my health journey and just feeling dismissed. And I'm like living proof that like all of these things have worked. And anyways, it was just a horrible experience. But then I went to a functional medicine doctor again this week, and same exact situation. And they were just like so encouraging and affirming of everything that I've been through. And then of course my functional medicine doctor is like just thrilled that this has just all come together, and she's not surprised, because she knew that I was so driven to do this and seek the Lord and figure this out and collaborate with her. And anyways, because of all of this and just not having consistent energy or symptoms, I mean, I really dealt with waves of depression. Ugh, I did not want to bring this up, but I am just airing it all out, because I'm not embarrassed of it, because the Lord has brought me through it. I had body shame from, probably 8 years old. And yes, it cycled, but during this time, it was just so prominent, and it was just so debilitating as well, that it was just keeping us from living life. Like, we didn't know if we could make plans, because I was also having decreased energy, like I said, but that goes along with the depression and the anxiety, and I'm just feeling rejected. Like, okay, if I did decide to show up somewhere, like, oh, this person is now talking to me about my weight, and I didn't bring it up at all, and they're giving unsolicited advice, or they're making comments about the size of my plate of my salad, or they're looking at my plate with judgmental eyes. I mean, if you know, you know. And I got to the point where I just like couldn't not say anything anymore. And then I felt rejected for calling them out, and like just not a fun time to live in that like bitterness and resentment and anger towards your body. And you just aren't the best version of yourself. And it does not feel like you are walking in the spirit at all. So it's easier to hide, like I said in the very first episode, of just like, it's easier if I just shut myself off from the world because I don't have to experience their judgment. And I don't even feel like dealing with their judgment because I don't have anything that fits, and I don't have the energy to deal with this. Is this life even worth living? I mean, honestly, like those are some real thoughts. This is very vulnerable, I know, but if you know, you know. And a lot of people don't talk about this. I know that mental health has become like more of a thing over the years. I'm very happy about that. And then the other part of it was just, this is probably related to the depression and anxiety as well, is just everything I ate seemed to cause a reaction. And suddenly I just had food sensitivities, not just to like a couple of things, but to almost everything. I mean, Grant, how ridiculous was it? We had to buy all the different histamine intolerance cookbooks, and then we were trying so many different diet plans. I mean, and it was fun, and it helped us like learn how to cook more strategically and whatnot, but it was so hard. It was just so it's not a lifestyle, not a sustainable lifestyle by any means. And these symptoms, this isn't really chronological at this point. This is just kind of two, like I said. But I remember, I mean, food sensitivities and just the PMS NSAID thing, back to that. Like I took my pharmacy final exam before we went on rotations on the floor, curled up in a ball, sipping on bone broth because I had such bad gastritis from all of the NSAIDs. And in order to study for this, I was in such excruciating pain. It was just miserable. Grant had to read out loud all of our notes because I literally couldn't read. I just was in so much agony. And I passed that exam, but it was like the exam that you needed to pass over like all your didactic training from the last 3 years of pharmacy school before they sent you out to rotations. And so it was just like, okay, this is really impacting my calling now. This is really impacting why I think that I'm on this earth. And like, anyway, so you can see how it's just all interconnected. All these symptoms just stacking on top of each other. And then from like an aesthetic standpoint, my face just looked puffy and I was doing all of the things. I know people say that, but like when I go all in, like I have to watch myself because the all or nothing mindset can really creep in. I just want to make sure that I've covered everything. So my face looked constantly puffy despite daily gua shas in the morning, in the evening, which is just that little thing for your face that you use to help reduce puffiness. And you do it on the lymphatic drainage points. And it's a very, if you've done it, look it up. Anyways, and then I would do monthly ELT lymphatic massages. These are like very specific lymphatic massages that really get deep into the lymph. And I was on detox protocols that included things like dry brushing, Epsom salt baths, saunas, sauna blanket, massages like I mentioned, and then of course just swapping out all of our household and toiletries for non-toxic substitutes. It was a lot. And then things got worse. My joints hurt even though I was young and active. This was all like late 20s. I even had to have an MRI because I was training for our turkey trot as a family. I just wanted to make sure that it went well. And so I started to just train a little bit for it because I hadn't run in a while. And I guess I developed some type of Baker's cyst, even though I was working out and we were doing like HIIT training and other cardiovascular workouts. We weren't like specifically running. And so, yeah, I had to have an MRI and found just inflammation. I'm just saying, like in other places besides just dealing with my weight. And I'm sure the weight contributed to it as well, just with extra pressure on your joints. And the same goes for dental work. I started to have to get extensive dental work. I got my first crown. And this was something I had never struggled with before. As you can imagine, as an achiever growing up, I really took pride in the fact that I didn't have any cavities. Now, gradually, as I got older and stuff, I had cavities, but this was just really alarming. I had never really had this level of extensive dental work, and it just started to scare me that this was inflammation taking over my whole body, and my CRP level, which is a marker of inflammation, started to really rise, and it got up to, I think 18, which is very high. Anything greater than 3 for CRP. This isn't HSCRP, which is a different one if you're familiar with these markers. But still, it was just creeping up year after year with all these symptoms, with all this weight gain. But nobody had any like real answers for me because they're like, oh, you're doing everything you could be doing. Anyways, like I said, we just were hiding at home a lot and we were just surviving. We were not living. And this was as a Christian who thought I had already broken free of body shame and the opinions of others. And like I knew in my head that I was fearfully and wonderfully made. And I was still doing my quiet times. It's not like I just like stopped talking to the Lord and I just prayed for healing. But all of that just felt like miles away from really being like heart knowledge that I like truly believed. And so I kind of like stopped praying about it at some point just because I didn't give up, but I was just kind of tired of being chronically disappointed, which is sad looking back at it. Anyways, did I leave anything out, Grant? Okay, he's shaking his head no. Am I exaggerating anything? Yeah, no. I know it was really tough times. This is really sad. I'm sorry this podcast sounds really sad right now. I promise it'll be more upbeat. I think about that when I'm like writing social media posts and stuff. I'm like, I just want them to know that like, yes, I'm serious, but like, I also like to have fun. I'm like a real person. I'm not just like, yes, I love like inspirational things, and I love like talking about like hard things and how God showed up and delivered me and others. But yeah, I'm also like human. So anyways, with that being said though, through God's help, this is the real turning point though. Like I am able to look back and be grateful that I maintained great habits and never gave up searching for answers, even though my health was worsening mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. He specifically gave me Psalm 27:14 as a life verse back in 2015 when I was doing all of that ministry work and starting to invite him into my fitness routines and my eating routines after my first round of burnout. And it was just a reminder of perseverance when I didn't feel like I was making progress or I was actually backsliding, I guess, in my metabolic health journey despite all this effort. He just reminded me to be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord. And this has been a verse that I have been anchored into, for years. To keep going and keep trying, even when I don't get the outcome that I expect or think I, quote unquote, deserve. And I'm just really grateful for God giving me that as a verse. And I, had a little Instagram with it for a while as well. And I mean, it just has really been something that I've centered a lot of my time and energy and effort meditating on because there's so many times when I did want to give up. So if that's you, I want you to be strong and take heart and hope in the Lord. Because I mean, at the end of the day, is this going to be too much of a tangent? We already got the gift that we don't deserve with getting the gospel. And from that, I was really able to accept that even if he didn't heal my body, even if I kept getting bigger and bigger, my identity is in him, and that I can just surrender everything to him. My identity is not in outcomes or what other people think of me. And this is something that I just desperately wanted to believe for years, but I just couldn't. And now we know that inflammation was on the loose in my body, and it was basically on fire. And we needed something to help extinguish the flames of inflammation, chronic stress, sleep apnea, insulin resistance, hormonal imbalances, hypothyroidism, PCOS, suspected endo, like I said. That's a whole can of worms. I'm not going to go there, but at the time, it was still quite the puzzle piece, and it still is. And years of medical gaslighting, spending so much money, effort, time, heartache, just leaving me hopeless for long-lasting change. And even the functional medicine world was leaving me without answers. They just pointed me to more anti-inflammatory diets, supplements, workouts, which I was already doing, or they would just run more labs. And that I know is a hot topic because then you're like, okay, I don't have a practitioner to like write for what I need if you do the direct to consumer labs. Anyways, that's kind of where we're stuck at right now is a lot of conventional medicine doctors are getting turned off by functional medicine because everybody's ordering these labs and then they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Anyways, I knew there had to be more. So I set out to figure out why I was feeling this way. I mean, I knew diabetes ran in my family and I was determined to avoid that. I was constantly told that my A1C was fine, but now we know that fine isn't necessarily optimal, and that's not the only way to measure metabolic health. So stay tuned. But like I said, I had honestly just come to the point where like I was okay with being the largest size I'd ever been, and all of that mental shame and stigma that comes along with that. I just wanted to feel good again and avoid diabetes. I started to fully surrender my metabolic health and body image over to the Lord. Not just like a one-time thing though, like I started to do it every single day. And like I mentioned, if I never lost another pound, I truly knew that I could rest in Him. And that was new. That was a brand new feeling. And through this process of renewing my mind and spending more and more time with Him and just truly surrendering was actually my word of that year. And we started doing the Bible recap plan. I started taking daily walks and just worshiping. And anyways, He did a lot at that time in our life of just closing chapters and starting new ones. And that's when He started assembling a care team that blended the best of conventional and functional medicine. And He brought me, the doctor I was talking about earlier, a functional or integrative, she calls herself actually, I think, doctor who specializes in women's hormones and actually listened to me. She collaborated with me not only as a patient, but also just like respected my training as a pharmacist and valued my opinion, which that's a whole thing. And I just felt heard and seen and known. And through her help, we added some tools that helped decrease my inflammation and balance my hormones. And we're going to talk about this a lot more down the road, I'm sure. But when you get into that inflamed state like I did with the high CRP, despite doing all the things and the high insulin level as well, you start to see how some people really cannot get out of this vicious cycle of inflammation on their own. And that's why the shame and stigma of using medications and tools needs to fall. Because they do need strategic pharmacological intervention. But oftentimes, I'll confess, this was me. It's viewed as a failure or cheating. I hate that. But that's kind of the mindset I had was like, okay, I want to be on no prescription medications because otherwise I have failed. And that just achiever mindset and that pride is really what it is, kept me from getting the breakthrough that I really needed. But we know God is an on-time God and He had to work some other stuff out as well. And yeah, it's not a failure. I just think it needs to be stewarded well. And of course, on the other side, a pill for every ill is not the way to go either. But we just have to steer clear of an all or nothing mindset. This is rooted in perfection and just breeds shame. And like I said, it just delays people from getting the help that they actually need. And I so wish that I did not wear that no prescription medications, like a badge of honor, but it's part of my story. And it just left me just struggling and just powering through each and every day, just barely making it through. But anyways, while I was on the strategic set of medications, alongside all of the other lifestyle modifications that I'd already made and had as good habits, I actually started to wear a continuous glucose monitor again. I had previously worn this with some success a couple years before, but I didn't quite understand how to harness its full potential back then, so I stopped doing it because it was expensive at the time and needed a prescription, and it was hard to find providers that would write for it. But this time around, I started to fine-tune all of these good habits I already had based on my patterns of my blood sugar in real time and what I had learned from seeking out additional training in metabolic health and functional medicine. And what a powerful combination. I mean, this was like amazing to get that real-time feedback and make a personalized strategy that was like not related to the scale. just learning how to use data in a different way was just a huge win. I also started managing my emotional health more, sleep, stress, nervous system. I finally gave that the attention it deserved and started to bring God into every aspect of that journey. During this Holy Spirit-led transformation journey of my metabolic health, I went to counseling. I started wearing a CPAP machine, prioritized having a day off each week to have fun. We love our Sabbath. I implemented sunlight exposure into my day or using the light box like I mentioned, began journaling again. I love the Kairos journal. If you are looking for a good journal, it's been so great. And I started singing in our church choir again and just so much more. I actually started living again, which is ultimately why I named this Metabolic. I didn't know it at the time, but God was building my metabolic lifestyle through proper and prayerful use of powerful tools like GLP-1s, CGMs, supplements, prayer walks outside after my meals, increasing protein and fiber, strength training, consistent sleep schedules, journaling, singing, and more. And these are just a few examples for my personalized metabolic lifestyle. So if this sounds like a lot to you, just for some context, this was over the course of years, just building it one thing at a time and slowing down and fine-tuning things, writing out routines. But that's also just the beauty of a lifestyle. It looks different for everyone, and it can change as we grow and age and step into different seasons of life. So I had the time and I was really motivated to figure out the solution. So I went, like I said, all in on just really trying to figure out what's going on because I knew my life depended on it. And that's not dramatic. That is just the truth. And I knew that I needed to give it more attention during that time without idolizing it. So that way I could scale back and it would just truly be a lifestyle without having to give it as much effort because it's just a part of who I am now. It's okay, I do walk after I eat. I do get regular sunshine. I do have fiber with every meal. I'm not going to list all the things, but I just looked up one day and I'm like, oh, wow, this really is a lifestyle. And that's just a really beautiful thing. And certainly medications helped because it helped me see the progress with a GLP-1, but it wasn't everything. It wasn't there just for the appetite suppression. That wasn't my issue. Mine was inflammation. And so that's where I just hope that sharing this whole journey for you can potentially expedite your pain and suffering and get you through the valley season, because I wish that I had a podcast like this to help me navigate this, especially from a faith-based perspective. There was just really nothing out there. So that's why we're doing this. So, okay, let me take a deep breath because that was a lot. And it's also a lot to just tell your story. It's just always oh, wow, I live this. But it's good for the body to get that out. That's what I was talking about with the emotional and trauma and all of that. So ultimately, all of this is why a core value of Metabolic is to stop dieting and start building a metabolic lifestyle. But if you're still curious what that actually means, it just really means an intentional lifestyle that promotes healthy living consistently and not just so laser focused on calories in versus calories out or avoiding very specific foods. A Christian metabolic lifestyle invites Jesus into the journey, and we do that through a stewardship lens where every rhythm is an act of worship rather than just a discipline to get skinny and look better on the outside. So that's the number one, is that it's intentional. And 2, it's through a stewardship lens. 3, it's well-rounded. Besides nutrition and movement, it also just takes into consideration a faith-based mindset, emotion, stress, sleep, and hormones when looking at your data, like the number on the scale, your blood sugar data on your continuous glucose monitor, your macros, your number of steps. There's a lot of health data that we can tap into now, but we have to also make sure we steward that well and we're not getting our sense of self-worth from achieving a good score on those things. So anyways, like I said, I used to think that sleep and stress management were a waste of time, and I ignored them for years because I was just too stressed to worry about my stress. But that stubborn and prideful mindset, and I didn't think I had a prideful mindset because I wasn't bragging, but it really was a prideful mindset. Anyways, it impacted my metabolic health, and I was just so wrong. And I was so overwhelmed and just wanted to prioritize the most important things, or the things that I thought were most important, which, like I said, was calories in versus calories out, and becoming more and more disciplined with clean eating and customizing my workouts. But that is not the whole picture when you're building a metabolic lifestyle. It needs to be well-rounded. Okay, next, grace-based. So this is what I was saying about not seeking perfection with all the different rhythms that you implement. Not having an all or nothing mindset where it's like, okay, I have to be perfect or I'm not going to do it at all. Because that is a diet mindset of like, okay, I'm going to go all in and I'm going to start my diet on Monday. Oops, I messed up. Okay, I'm going to start it over tomorrow. Oop, I messed up again. I'm going to start it over tomorrow. Okay, actually, let me make it through the weekend and I'm going to start it over on the next Monday. And you get into this vicious cycle where you're either perfect or you're avoiding. The problem from that as well is that we can start to get our identity from the data or the progress that we're seeing as well. So we have to really make sure that we're giving ourselves grace with our progress, and making sure that when we look at the scale and when we look at the steps or the activity level that we've had that day, or the macros or whatever it may be, the blood sugar data on your CGM, like, did I have a lot of spikes? That we are giving ourselves a lot of grace and just being kind with ourselves, because we want to remove the shame, because that is going to be so healing to the body. It's going to bring Jesus into it. Ultimately, it's what's going to make it last through the highs and lows of life. And yeah, just real life. Like, life is hard. You never know when somebody's going to like pass away or get sick, or an appliance is going to go out or something like that. Like, and you have to be able to adopt and give yourself grace and get back on the horse for the next meal, not even the next day. So anyways, that's a really big one. I'm very passionate about that. I feel like I'm passionate about all of this, which I am. But anyways, so much so that I feel like my voice is going. But here we go. Hang with me. I know this is getting a little long. So the last one is sustainable. And we just kind of touched on that. So meaning that it actually lasts. So when life hits, it's going to allow you to just keep going. It's not just going to be this program that is 12 weeks long and then, oh, that was a good thing that I did and checked off my bucket list. It's like, no, this is like for life. And you have different needs. And that's what's so cool as you age and grow, using things like a continuous glucose monitor, because you can see how you may have, different needs and more sensitive to stress as you get older, or needing a little more protein or a little more fiber or whatever it may be to have more stable blood sugar. So yeah, ultimately the goal is just to build a metabolic lifestyle. So if you are on a GLP-1, you can come off of it safely and effectively, and it doesn't have to be a long-term Band-Aid to your metabolic dysfunction. But like I said, it can be the boost for decreasing inflammation that your body needs. And if you aren't on a GLP-1, then you can use just a CGM, or just tune into your symptoms as well, because you don't want to be on a CGM forever, and build a metabolic lifestyle that way. And then maybe check in with yourself with a CGM every couple of months and just be like, okay, where am I at? And you just start to learn how to use these tools. And it's really encouraging to just keep building that metabolic lifestyle and fine-tuning things, because you're noticing a difference in your energy and decreased food sensitivities and decreased PMS and increased confidence and decreased body shame. And you've been free from all those like horrible thoughts, and you want to keep going. So it's a vicious cycle in a good way now. So I'll wrap up by talking specifically about what this actually may look like practically as you start to build this metabolic lifestyle, because I do want to give you all some like tactical stuff. It's going to look like tuning into your body and just asking yourself, getting curious, how do I feel in my body right now? Awareness is the very first step. Learning to tune into your symptoms, especially before and after meals, that's huge. So you can learn different strategies to help remedy and then prevent these issues in the future. Blood sugar spikes in non-diabetics are really just going to be symptoms of high blood sugar. And for diabetics, I'll just say a little disclaimer here, or pre-diabetics, insulin resistance, definitely consult with your doctor about signs and symptoms of high and low. They should have already trained you on that if they haven't, but that's where you see the increased thirst, frequent urination, blurred vision, those sort of things. But with blood sugar spikes in non-diabetics, or maybe slightly insulin resistant, I'm not diagnosing here. Most people experience fatigue if they're spiking, brain fog, mood changes, just lack of motivation. And that's where we can look at our nutrition, our movement, sleep, stress, emotional health, all the things I talked about in my story and how they impact your metabolic health. And you get that with real-time data when you look at your CGM. But I think it's important, like I said, that you don't want to be on a CGM forever. So you have to learn how to correlate that number with the actual symptoms. And for me, decreased energy levels, headaches, decreased brain fog, focus are the quickest ways that I can tell that my blood sugar is spiking. And it's why I don't sit down after eating most meals, let myself walk around for 5 to 10 minutes, just like do some chores around the house. I get creative. If I'm going to scroll on my phone, then I'm walking around, pacing, just to avoid a spike. Or I pair my meal with enough protein and fiber, but you can't always control that, I know, as you're like actually out there living life. So just learning some tools as you go and you do this long enough, you just become very in tune to your body. So the goal of that whole section is just to know the questions to ask yourself to figure out why this is going on and then what to do based on those questions. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, next. Tuning into your blood sugar. So this is where we are going to use a continuous glucose monitor. And once you've felt it and you've seen it, you've identified it, it's hard to not notice. You just really start to make that connection with the symptoms. And quick story time, Grant, it took him years to realize low blood sugar symptoms were actually taking place. Everyone would always say, oh, he's hangry, but we really started to tune in with data and symptoms and realize that this is actually really helpful for our marriage because now he's able to tell me, hey, I can talk to you in about 15 to 20 minutes. But right now, like if I talk to anybody, like it's not going to go well. So let's just pause this. So, I mean, this is how like we start living in the overflow because it's no longer just about like weight loss. It's truly about like your relationships as well and how you show up for your people. And that's why it's so important to tune into your body and your blood sugar. Oh, and of course, I think we all know like common signs and symptoms of low blood glucose. Now, this can be an emergency and deadly for people who have diabetes. So I'm not talking to those people, but it is the same type of thing of like feeling shaky or nervous or anxious, sweating, chills, irritability or impatience. That's Grant's. Confusion, fast heartbeat. I actually just had this at the doctor's office. I could feel my blood sugar tanking and I was not equipped with like a chomp stick or a Greek yogurt when we were traveling to the appointment. And so I had a fast heartbeat plus white coat stuff. I get nervous. But anyways, feeling lightheaded or dizzy, hunger, feeling sleepy. You guys know there's a lot. So go look into that if you really think, this could be low blood sugar. But I think more people are tuned into that than high blood sugar symptoms. And honestly, a lot of us aren't walking around with low blood sugar, if I'm just being honest, because we are like in a hyper-fed state in our world. We actually need to be more familiar with the symptoms of high blood sugar for long-term complications. Low blood glucose is like in the acute. You're like, okay, this is very scary. I need to address this now. Versus high blood sugar is more serious over time as it develops. And that's where you have like the spectrum of insulin resistance. And I'm not going to get into that today, but we all know where diabetes can lead. And it's not a great, uncontrolled diabetes can lead, I should say. All right, last but not least, tuning into the Lord. This is not really last. From a Christian perspective, we know that Jesus brings freedom to any shame and unforgiveness that we could be harboring in our hearts, which may be weighing you down in more ways than one. Get it? Like weighing you down. Anyways, inviting the Lord as you implement these consistent rhythms is going to be a game changer. And it's going to be out of a place of overflow. And change is hard. And what I mean by a place of overflow is like you're so filled up with the Holy Spirit empowering you that like He's going to empower you to go do the things. You're so surrendered that it's no longer striving. You're looking at this as stewardship. And then you're going to have more and more energy and confidence because you're renewing your mind and you're working on your body and your blood sugar. And anyways, like I said, a good vicious cycle. But the initial part is hard to get started and change is hard. It's more energy to start a motor, right? I'm not a mechanical person, but it's more energy basically to start something like voltage wise than it is to keep it running. This is what my business coach told me. And I just think that's like such a good analogy when you're thinking about like, okay, why am I being so hard on myself when I'm just starting to build something new? So ask the Lord for help. Bring him in to all of the different things, especially if you're having trouble. And that's not always going to be a knee-jerk reaction for people. So I've actually put little pocket Jesuses all throughout like the areas that are a part of my metabolic lifestyle. And so that could be something that you do, or put scripture there as well, just to remind you when you are cooking and maybe you don't like to cook. Okay, I'm going to ask the Lord for help with this, help with planning a meal, so that way it's less overwhelming. Or in the bathroom when you're getting ready, maybe before you weigh, you can be reminded to pause and pray, or a meltdown in the closet so you can be reminded, okay, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Be strong and take heart. You can just have scripture come to your mind. So anyways, these are just all different moments where you can just seek him moment by moment. And that's really where you start to build that Holy Spirit-led metabolic health transformation. I mean, even with your mind too, like if you're tempted to seek perfection with your blood sugar data and you have like a thought like, ooh, look at me, like, I don't know, just, I mean, yes, you want to encourage yourself, but if you are like taking too much pride in perfection of your blood sugar data, which sounds like very niche, but a lot of us are achievers and that can happen, but just want to encourage you to pause and pray there. And also on the flip side, if you are like, oh, I just keep spiking, like nothing is getting better, pause and pray there and bring him into it. So ultimately, all this comes down to is just constantly surrendering and letting him empower you, so that you don't have to do this in your own strength and end up striving, which we know leads to burnout and like resentment and anger and bitterness, and just does not bear good fruit. So this is a lot longer than I expected, but I mean, this is a big deal. This is like what changed everything for me, was just knowing those 3 prongs. And so that's why I wanted to give them to you all. And I want you to read all of Psalm 27 and just let it encourage you. There's a lot of other great verses in there. Like, I will remain confident in this, that I will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. Like, if you are just like needing some encouragement to get through this valley season, like take heart, be strong and take heart, and just cling to this, write it down, put it on sticky notes or index cards. Take it with you in your purse, in your bathroom, in your kitchen, wherever you go on a regular basis, and just commit yourself to memorizing scripture so that when you have those moments, you can pray his word back to him. And so that's what I want to leave you with, is just a question, maybe to journal. Just where in your metabolic health journey do you need to tune into the Lord? Where do you need to be strong and take heart? And how is he inviting you to lay down all the striving of diet culture and just surrender that area to him so you can build a metabolic lifestyle that truly lasts? So I hope that those questions are helpful for you as you just process through even the idea of starting this type of lifestyle. So congratulations if you made it this far, and just pressing play on this to begin with, that you are just like ready for change and you're just like curious, because that's what this is all about, is just getting curious about your body, your blood sugar, the Lord. Maybe you don't like have a relationship with the Lord. Like, you're just curious because you're like, there's got to be something more, and you want to tune in. So I hope this encourages you to tune in to your body, blood sugar, and Lord as you stop dieting and build a faith-based metabolic lifestyle that lasts. And if you are looking for encouragement and community, then come on over and join the Metabolic room. This is just our free Facebook community. It's basically just an extension of the podcast where we just encourage one another, share ideas, prayer requests, wins, and it just helps to have that coaching and community to take all of that head knowledge to heart knowledge, because you realize you're not in it alone and you're being reminded of this over and over and over together, day by day. And it's not necessarily that you don't know the information. I mean, we are in like the information era. I'm not sure what the word is, but basically we're inundated with information overload lately, and we have more tools than ever, especially with AI. So a lot of this may sound like common sense to you, but it's the implementation and the accountability and the strategy to stay consistent. That's like a whole other part of it. And that's the beauty of community. And then also, you don't know what you don't know. That's the pride part, right? And you may learn something that a doctor will never dig into because they assume you know what they mean when they say, eat healthy, or they hand you a couple of brochures and they have nobody to follow up with you about it. And certainly no one really checking your like real-time data unless you actually have diabetes. And we are trying to be proactive rather than reactive with this. And that's the beauty of community. And you may be reminded of something that you did know, and now it's going to make so much more sense because you're just in a different headspace to receive it, and you're more intentional and focused, and all of those pillars of building a metabolic lifestyle that I mentioned earlier. So I just want to encourage you, invite people into your process. That's what God wants us to do. He always brings people into his process. And sometimes it takes longer and it's frustrating for those of us who like efficiency, but it's always more fruitful in the long run. There's always a lesson, and it's more beautiful because we weren't meant to heal in isolation. It actually goes against our nervous system, but that is a whole other future episode. And I think this is a good place to stop. So thank you guys so much for hanging with me. And I really hope that this encourages you to stop dieting and start building your metabolic lifestyle and bring people into your process. I'm here for you. And ultimately, I just want you to know that you are wonderfully made for more. So let's start living like it.
Take my voice and let me sing, always only for my King.
This podcast is for educational purposes and encouragement only. It is not medical or mental health advice, and I am not your personal pharmacist or provider. So be sure to always consult your healthcare team before making any changes to your medications, supplements, nutrition, or other health routines.